Today I'll be making a custom function that lets you make a lookup table that specifies what column do you want to sort on. So in this case I have two salespersons where I want to change what the sort order is. So that could be age of the person you're selling to or the amount, and then I've just left this be descending, so the order. And my table is pretty simple. I have 4 salespersons and I want each salesperson to have one table that has already been sorted for them so they can get going. And I don't care about Kobeni and Aki, they'll get the basic sort order, which would just be due date ascending. So the first thing I want to do with custom functions is to do the thing manually. I first need to make a parameter that I can refer, because this query will be used as my custom function query. So I'll be turning this into a function. I want to make a new parameter, which is just called salesperson param, or param salesperson, which you take a list, and you can then add more people to this in the future when you have more salespeople. I'm just going to set that to Denji, and Denji and Nyota are the only ones in the table right now, but I want you to be able to select these two. So now I have that, and then I actually don't want to call salespeople, I want to call my parameter. And then I want to use this value to do a lookup into the TBL lookup table, which is just a new step where I say I want to look into TBL lookup, and I want the one record, so curly brackets, the one record where the column in the record, the column salesperson, should be equal to the name of this step, which right now is source, and that will give me my information. And I want to change that name from source to be my salesperson. So I don't want that to be called source, I want that to be called my salesperson. Just because then I don't have two values that have the same name, so salesperson and salesperson. I have salesperson and my salesperson. Now I have the two informations. I need the sort column and sort by, and in the last video I showed that you can use this, but personally I would rather have one step called sort column and one step called sort by. So I'll rename this step, and then I want to make that new step called sort column, and this should then be equal to just the value in my sort column, which is the amount, and then I can repeat that, and this should also be called sort by. So this is just me personally. These two steps aren't necessary because you can do the lookup from here and already get the information. And I want this value to be one you can manually type in once you actually call the function. And at that point I just need to actually grab my salespeople table and then do my selecting. So I want table select rows, and the table I want is called salespeople. And then I want each row where the value in my salesperson column is equal to the value in my step my salesperson. So now I only have the one with Denji. So here I need to add another step where I do a sort based on the value in sort by and on the column in sort column. And I can abuse the fact that you can only have descending or ascending to do a simple if function. So I'll be saying if the value in sort by, if that's equal to descending, well then I want to sort descending, and if it's not equal to descending, then I want to sort ascending. And I want to sort my custom one, which I need to go back and change the name of that. And here it helps to have, normally you do this manually and then change it, but since I have notes I can cheat a bit. So I want a list of lists, and I want the column I want to sort on is the value from sort column. And what I want to sort, like the type of sorting, is order descending. And you have to pass in a list of lists because you could have multiple levels of sorting. So in case you have two values that are equal based on the first sort, then you would sort on the second. This is fine. And then I want else, because if the text isn't descending, then it must be ascending. Meaning you don't actually have to write ascending in the lookup table, as long as you remember to write descending with a capital D. But then that should be ascending instead. Check that it actually sorted correctly, and Denji wanted to sort amount in descending order, because when you do it like this you don't get the little 1 button here if I do like that, ascending. Then you get here an arrow, and if you sort multiple, then you get the 1 and 2, but you don't get that right here. And I should call these something more descriptive. And then this is actually already everything I needed to do from the function, so I can just right click and turn it into a function. And that would be called dynamic sorting. And this will then work for both Denji and Nyota because you can find them in the lookup table. But for Aki and Kobeni, it's going to break, and I'll show how to handle that too. But right now I can go ahead and make a new query and show that it works. So first I want to be outside, and I want to call that Denji and say that this value is just equal to Denji. And that's fine, and then I can call the function because I'll now be passing that in as my variable or my parameter. So that was called dynamic sorting, and the parameter to pass in is just source, and then this gives me everything because that just passes in source into my function, and that returns what I want. But I don't want that to be called source because that's confusing. I want that to be called my salesperson. And when I then repeat that, actually I should call that call function because I'm going to copy paste that query. So I can duplicate that and now call that Nyota and change the name here. But now I'm going to have a problem when I try to do it for Aki and Kobeni because you can't find them in TBL lookup. And I just want to show that what happens here, because this is a problem with custom functions, is you can't easily see what the problem is here. It just says an error occurred. The key didn't match in rows and table. And what is the average user going to think when they see that? That doesn't make any sense. And that's the benefit here of having the parameter and having the function like this, like a normal query, because troubleshooting this is going to be more difficult. But I can just change the parameter to be Aki and try to understand what's going on. Well, this step works, but I fail at the lookup stage because I can't find Aki in salesperson. So I can go in here and say, well, TBL lookup, well, I can't find him here. So that makes perfect sense, which means sort column breaks and sort by breaks. Filter on salesperson works, but sorted rows breaks. And I need to fix that. And the lazy version is fine as long as you have one standard way you want to handle every single person's sort order that isn't in this. So if you have the basic sort order, which would be I want my due date to be smallest first, so the one that's closest to be too old, then this is fine. So as long as you have that basic version, we can then change this function to say that I want to try to do this, otherwise I want to return something else. So if this breaks, I just want something else, and we can just say So this just returns a text, but I don't want to return the text. I want to sort my table, but here I'm going to basically do the function without the dynamic sorting, so the manual sort method, which is just to do the table sort again. So here I'm actually wrapping multiple functions within one, so you could make this another dynamic function, but I'm not going to do that. So I want to sort a table, and the table I want to sort is a filtered version of my salespeople table. So again, I want my salespeople table, and I want only those rows where the salesperson column is equal to my first step. So now I have my filtered version of my table, and I need to mind my parentheses. So how do I want to sort this? That was again a list of lists, because you can sort on multiple columns. So I know it's called due date, and I want to sort that in an ascending order. And then I also want to sort, in case I have multiple with the same date, I want to sort them descending with amount. So now I have again only Aki, and I have age, doesn't matter, but I have due date. And I don't have any with the same date, but I believe I have that for Kobeni. And now I need to update my function to not just call that, but actually do this. And I have two equal signs. And now Aki is fine, and I can duplicate that and say Kubeni, and all I have to change is just the name up here. And then in her case, she does have 2 days, 2 of the same days, which means it's sorted by highest amount first. So you could put this into one function, or you could make it a step in itself. So if I just do that, we just duplicate that and say the alternative method is to take all of this and add that as steps in here. That is fine, and I'm going to say I want to do the select rows portion first, and I need to mind my parentheses. That's fine. Now I'm sorting on Kubeni, and then I add another step where I say I want to do my sort, but then instead of having this function within a function, I will delete that and say I want custom 1. And of course these should have descriptive names. So now I have my sorter, and you can see the 1 and the 2, and then I can say try to do the dynamic sorting, otherwise call custom 2. So this is again more pedagogical, because you can now see, well, okay, well, if the dynamic sorting doesn't work, then you should go into custom 2, which goes into custom 1, and then you can see what's going on. Well, I'm just taking the table and sorting it, and then I'm going into the table and filtering it, and then I'm sorting it. So filter and sort. And you could make this a function itself, but I think since it's only 2 steps, I wouldn't do that. I would just make them like this. I think this is more pedagogical, because again, if this first step works, then it's never going to try to do the sort step, because Power Query is lazy. So it's not going to be slow or anything. Like, you're not going to benefit really from making these 2 into a function, I think, because it's so simple. But I think when you have multiple steps, like here, I think it makes sense to turn this into a function. Especially when you're combining information from 2 tables now, and you also have a parameter, so this can be a little tricky. You can do it without the function, but then you have to repeat stuff. So I would use this method where you have the one value where your user has to go in and type this in manually. Well, they only have to do it once if they want to add new people. And then keep these 2 steps, because this is what you do in case the function fails. And then the function just does its thing. So that this method would be what I prefer over this method, because this is difficult to read. You can figure it out, but it's nicer to be able to visualize it like this. But that was everything actually. So yep,